You know, there's just nothing quite like the holidays. The lights, the merriment, spending time with your friends, your family, your pets, your ancient Build-A-Bear creatures that can turn into apocalyptic reptiles. Welcome to Gremlins. Keep watching and we'll figure out if this really is the best Christmas movie of all time. And also, how it changed the history of films forever. Gremlin starts out with a not-so-great inventor, Rand Peltzer, who's going to tell us a little story. Rand is trying to sell his not-so-great gadgets and also buy a present for his son in time for Christmas. A little boy leads Rand down to his grandfather's shop, where Rand shows us that he's also not so great of a salesman. In the middle of a disastrous pitch, he hears this interesting noise. He goes over and finds this little critter singing in a cage. It's a Mogwai. Rand thinks it would be the perfect gift for his son. But the shop owner, Grandpa, is not selling it. Turns out the little boy is a better salesman than both Rand and his grandfather, because he meets Rand inside the alleyway and ends up selling the Mogwai to Rand. But he gives Rand 3 rules that he must follow. Rule number 1, the Mogwai does not like bright light, and sunlight will actually kill him. Rule number 2, don't get the Mogwai wet. And rule number 3, absolutely, under no circumstances should you feed a Mogwai after midnight. And then, just in case you forgot that this is the best Christmas movie ever, we've got some snow and Darlene love to remind you. Billy Peltzer is having a rough go of it on this snowy day. His car won't start, his neighbor is going on about how you can't trust foreign materials, but fortunately he makes it into work late, but his boss doesn't notice. Other things that are going unnoticed? The tension between him and his cute coworker Katie, who gets him to sign this petition to save her parents' pub that she works at. We meet Mrs. Deagle, who's basically this movie's version of Scrooge. You know, she's the richest person in town, she's mean to the poor, and apparently she's open to animal torture.
What?
She's mad at Billy because he had, let his dog out and it had broken her snowman statue or something. And her pitch to Billy to make up for this broken statue is that Billy should give her his dog so that way she can either have it put to sleep at a pound or torture it to death herself.
What?
A slow, painful death. Maybe I'll put him in my spin dryer on high heat.
This is a PG movie.
What?
That night, Rand gives Billy his new present, and we see just how stinking adorable Mogwai are. They've named this one Gizmo, and Billy settles in with his really cool new pet. We meet Billy's friend Pete, who accidentally spills water on Gizmo. It's then we watch Gizmo writhe in pain as something happens beneath his skin and his fur, and then these 5 little fur balls pop out of his body. And these 5 little fur balls become baby Mogwai, 5 little baby Mogwai. But Gizmo seems pretty sad about these new babies, and these babies don't quite seem to be like Gizmo. They're more mischievous. But Rand thinks this might just be the thing that he needs. Peltzer pets. He thinks these things can really sell. Some weird things start happening around the house, but they assume it was just Mrs. Deagle getting revenge on that Barney dog. Because that's a very normal thing for older women to do, to break into your house, string up your dog in Christmas lights, presumably so that way it will be left out all night, and die a slow, painful, cold death. Normal Mrs. Deagle things. Meanwhile, Billy shows off the Mogwai to his teacher, Mr. Hansen. Billy demonstrates how the Mogwai multiply with water, and Mr. Hansen wants to run some tests, so he ends up keeping one of the Mogwai. That night he stops by Katie's bar, where his intoxicated neighbor is going on and on about how bad foreign car parts are. And he's actually the first person in this movie to say it. Gremlins. Turns out the word gremlins can be traced back to 1920s, but I'll talk more about that after the movie. So Billy walks home with Katie and they talk about depression, ending your life, and Christmas.
Wow. While everybody else is opening up their presents, they're opening up their wrists.
Cheery thought.
It's true. The suicide rate's always the highest around the holidays.
This is still a PG movie.
Wow.
Billy doesn't quite understand what's causing this extreme negative reaction about Christmas with Katie, but that doesn't stop him from asking her out on a date. And she says yes. Also that night, the baby gremlins are hungry. And since, according to the clock, it's not quite midnight yet, Billy feeds them. On the other side of town, Mr. Hansen is running experiments on the Mogwai that Billy gave him, including taking a blood test. He wraps things up around 2 a.m., but he accidentally leaves a sandwich within the Mogwai's reach. The next morning, the baby Mogwai are gone, and in their place are these weird alien egg sacs all over his room. Billy then realizes that his clock was sabotaged, so he did technically feed them after midnight. They're gonna have to see what the heck happens from here. Mr. Hansen also has one of these alien eggs inside the cage that he had kept his Mogwai, and they've determined that this is the pupa stage of the Mogwai life cycle. So, it's Christmas Eve, Billy's dad is at some sort of sales convention, and Billy and his family and Mr. Hansen are all going about their normal lives. And then the gremlins hatch. Poor Gizmo. Mr. Hansen tells Billy about it and attempts to lure out this newly hatched critter. But by the time Billy makes it to the classroom, it's too late. It's not quite clear if Mr. Hansen is dead or not. What we did see was that the newly hatched former Mogwai bit his hand and stabbed a syringe in his butt. Meanwhile at home, the newly hatched gremlins are terrorizing poor little Gizmo. And then it's Billy's mom's turn. She holds herself pretty well though, blending one, stabbing another, microwaving a third to death. She's fighting off the remaining 2 gremlins when Billy ends up coming in and saves her with a sword. But the leader of this little pack, Stripe, gets away. Fun fact, according to a Reddit post by the director Joe Dante, originally Gizmo was supposed to turn into Stripe. But the executive producer, Steven Spielberg, really took a liking to Gizmo, and then he became one of the main heroes of the movie. So Stripe is what Gizmo would have looked like as a gremlin. That's fun. Billy, with Gizmo in hand, pursues Stripe to a local YMCA, and then Stripe jumps into the pool. Uh-oh. There are now many more gremlins. Billy attempts to go to the police about this, but they think he's playing some sort of prank, or maybe he's drunk. The gremlins are wreaking havoc around town. Messing with technology by changing TV antennas or messing with traffic lights, killing Billy's neighbor with a snowplow.
You always get to drive, because I'm the sheriff, asshole.
Mean Mrs. Deagle, who has a lot of cats named after different currency, gets distracted with some gremlin carolers. She's ultimately launched out of her second-story window. Kingston Falls is in calamity. The gremlins have also started terrorizing the bar where Katie works, but Billy is there with the bright lights of his car to save the day and get her on out of there. Well, almost. His car stops working again, so they have to end up finding refuge inside of a local theater. And it's there that Billy unlocks Katie's tragic backstory. So apparently, on Christmas Eve, her father went missing. And after a day or two, because the house was so cold, Katie started a fire in the fireplace, and then they found him. He was dressed up like Santa and had all of the family's gifts. Apparently he was going to surprise them by actually coming down the chimney, but then he broke his neck and his body just got stuck there.
And that's how I found out there was no Santa Claus.
So that is why Katie hates Christmas. This scene is probably one of the most baffling in the entire movie. Like, the lead up to this tragic backstory is there, and the tragic backstory itself is fine, sad but fine. It's just the delivery of it feels like it comes out of nowhere. Like the screenwriter was like, we need some more tragic, heartfelt moments.
We interrupt this program to bring you tragic backstory.
Billy's like, dang, that sucks. We should probably go.
What?
The suicide rate's always the highest.
So they walk through this apocalyptic looking town now and end up going inside of a movie theater where all of the gremlins have come to hang out before it gets too light outside. Billy and Katie rig up the theater to blow up with a gas leak. And blow up it does. However, the leader, Stripe, was actually grabbing candy from a nearby department store, so they have to grab him too before he can multiply, and they have to do this all over again. Billy and Katie kiss, and Billy goes after Stripe while Katie and Gizmo try to find where the heck this light switch in the department store is. Wait, did the Matrix steal this shot? Wait a minute. Did Saw steal this shot? In the fight with Stripe, Billy is not looking like he's doing so well. Because he's just a teen, man. And he got shot with a crossbow. And things are not looking any better when Stripe finds the chainsaw. But our boy Gizmo is here to the rescue with his brand new car. And Katie finally finds the flippin' light switch. Outside, Billy's dog Barney and his dad Rand are coming in to find Billy and Gizmo. Except, uh-oh, Stripe has a gun! And he found a water fountain. He's gonna reproduce again! But Gizmo opens the blinds and Stripe dies a slow, gross, painful death. That night, everyone's at Billy's house and getting cozy, and it looks like it might be happily ever after. When suddenly, the grandpa from the shop, he ends up taking Gizmo away back to the shop until Billy and his family are ready for the responsibility of a Mogwai. The movie ends with Rand Peltzer telling us that if anything funky is going on with our technology, turn on the lights and look around because it might just be a gremlin. The end. If I could describe this movie in just one word, it would be shenanigans. Tomfoolery, perhaps. Gremlins was followed up by Gremlins 2, The New Batch, in 1990. And then more recently an HBO series called Gremlins, Secrets of the Mogwai. It was directed by Joe Dante, who went on to direct Gremlins 2, Small Soldiers, which I would recommend watching, and the original Space Jam sequel, Looney Tunes, Back in Action. Gremlins is a part comedy, part horror, part head-scratcher of a movie that I don't think anybody expected to have such a massive impact on movies that we still see even today. But first, what the heck is a gremlin? Elves, goblins, trolls. These things have been in the imaginations of humans for hundreds of years, perhaps longer, maybe even thousands of years. But gremlins are a relatively modern invention. So allegedly, members of the UK's Royal Naval Air Service would use gremlins as like a slang word for lower ranking members who had all the sucky duties. And the origin of the word is actually pretty debated. But the most likely explanation is that it's like a mix of goblins and a popular beer that was widely available to service members at the time, Fremlin. But the idea became really popular amongst the Royal Air Force in the 1940s, where gremlins were thought to be these mischievous little creatures that like to mess with machinery. See, it was them that was to blame for all the inexplicable accidents or mechanical malfunctions that sometimes happened during flights.
Captain, it wasn't my fault that the plane crashed. It was the gremlins.
But what got gremlins out of the Royal Air Force and into the mainstream was a guy named Roald Dahl. You know, he's the guy who authored the Charlie James Matilda's Big Friendly Giant Peach Witches. He was in the Royal Air Force, and when he was transferred to Washington, D.C. in 1942, he wrote his first children's novel, Gremlins. The film was unfortunately ultimately scrapped when copyright issues between the RAF and Walt Disney couldn't be settled. Gee, I sure hope this isn't foreshadowing the Big Mouse Company ruining our copyright system. There were several more film appearances of Gremlins, but none that made the term more widely known, and none quite as popular, I would say, as the 1984 movie that we're talking about now. So now we know the origin of the term Gremlins. But Kyrie, what's this about a lasting impact on movies? Isn't this just a horror comedy Christmas movie for kids? Hold your horses there, my friend. We've got some fingers to point at Steven Spielberg. So this movie was released in the June of 1984. G is for everyone. PG is, I don't know if this is meant for toddlers, but children can still watch it. R is, if you are under 17, don't watch this movie. You are not allowed to watch this movie without a parent or guardian. And then X is absolutely no one under 17 is allowed to watch this movie. Up until 1983, Steven Spielberg was kind of a big deal. You know, having directed Jaws, the first Indiana Jones movie, E.T. the Extraterrestrial, and 1984 would prove no different. This one little movie that he directed called Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was released, and also Gremlins, of which he was the executive producer. Gremlins was initially advertised as, tee-hee, these little gremlins are so cute, but they'll get into anything. They're just so mischievous. And the thing about the Temple of Doom and Gremlins both is that upon their release, they were both rated PG. You know, the movies where...
While everybody else is opening up their presents, they're opening up their wrists.
Which, like, parents probably weren't super excited to have to explain to 6-year-olds. Now, neither Temple of Doom or Gremlins were strong enough or graphic enough to warrant this hard R label, but rated PG, safe for most children to watch? So Steven Spielberg had a great suggestion. He was like, what if we had a movie rating where we could include violence and action for some of the older kids, but parents can't get mad at us because we warned them about it. And thus, the PG-13 movie rating was born, cementing the legacy of Gremlins. Gremlins was originally written as a hard R horror movie, and that's straight from the writer's mouth. I wrote it as a straightforward horror film. Hard R, Mom's head comes rolling down the stairs. Billy and Katie go into a McDonald's and none of the food is eaten, but all of the people are eaten. But for now, a bigger question. Is Gremlins the best Christmas movie? Well, it could be. As of 2024, Gremlins is 40 years old, and it's still certainly stands out, as you'll see on all of these best Christmas movies of all time lists all over the internet. If you're somebody who gets pretty fatigued with the sugary Hallmark holiday movies, or you gravitate towards non-traditional Christmas movies like Die Hard, you should definitely give this a watch and let me know what you think of it. As I said before, Gremlins didn't end here. There's Gremlins 2, the new batch, which introduced a bunch of new Mogwai and Gremlins. Especially Greta.
What is that?
There are those who say that Gremlins 2 is the best Gremlins movie. So if you're interested in me covering that, let me know in the comments below. But before I go, I wanted to share one more Gremlins thing with you. As I was researching for this video, I found something beautiful. Mogwai and Gizmo are both undeniably adorable. And yet something throughout all the marketing and merchandising of Gremlins, the one thing that was inconsistent was the toys. And thus I present to you Cursed Gremlins. They're beautiful and I love them. Also, look at this. They're beautiful. There were some parts that had to be cut from this video, so if you're interested in longer versions of my videos, I can now introduce you to the Flights of Fantasy new Patreon. Ooh. On here, I'm going to be uploading longer versions of my videos, as well as voting on video topics, video progress updates, and more. Because if I can pay my editors, I can keep my kneecaps and make more videos. Until next time, my friends, my name is Kyrie. This is Flights of Fantasy. Thank you so much for watching. I want you to live well and don't feed your Mogwai after midnight, you idiot.